Lansay Go presents The Main Phase, episode 101. In this episode, we discuss who we are and how we interact with the game of Magic the Gathering, give some field reports from our Friday night Magic brews, discuss the pros and cons of Magic Weekend, and our thoughts on Ultimate Masters. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, hello, my name is Debo from Lansay Go, and welcome to The Main Phase, a Magic the Gathering podcast bringing you the latest MTG-related material. Today I am joined with our co-host, Jeremy. How are you doing today, JB?
Hello, everybody.
Today we're going to be having four topics we're going to be discussing today. First, just who we are, what we do. I know we're kind of a brand new podcast. We're still a relatively brand new site. And we just kind of want to give you guys a quick introduction to who we are and how we interact with the game Magic the Gathering.
I think here at Lansay Go, what's most important to remember is that we are adamant Magic players. We actually get out there, we go to our local game shops, we go to tournaments, we understand the standard meta. A lot of what we're going to do and a lot of what you'll see presented on the site is a gathering of some of the best deck archetypes as well as really hardcore constructed brews that we put together. But most of this and what you'll hear on the podcast is our discussions about the community at large, a lot of what we see as far as WotC news goes, Wizards of the Coast, and some of what we just really like to bring to your attention as we continue with these conversations.
That's right, JB. All right, and then next up on the docket today, we're also going to be having kind of like our first field reports, discussing how when we brought in some of our brews to our local game shops, how they did, what we think that we could do better with them, do a nice little banter back and forth between what we think we could do to upgrade the decks as we played them and saw the errors within them. And then we'll also be discussing Magic Weekend and what that means for us as the player base. And we'll also be discussing Ultimate Masters, discussing their spoilers, the costs, and just our various thoughts about it. All right, let's go. So let's go ahead and just delve right in. JB, you've been playing this game a lot longer than I have.
Yeah, 1993, 1994. How old were you in 93, 94?
3 or 4 years old.
Okay, so 3 or 4 years old. There's a bit of an age gap there, but that's fine. Doesn't mean we can't be friends. But
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, that is true. But 93, 94, when the game first came out, I was living in Italy. Fortunately, I had done a pretty heavy sell-off when we got back to the States. I had found a comic book store there that was really trying to get the game going. This is about the time that Legends was coming out, and then, Ice Age, Alliances, Visions, all of that was just really right around the corner. I started getting into that competitive side really as the Tempest block rolled out. That's really when I started going to, that was kind of like the first Friday night Magics, if you will, at that point. We were getting everybody together at a sub shop there in Columbia, Missouri. Hopefully somebody at some point hears this podcast and realizes that, oh my God, that guy was there. You know what I mean? But we used to get together at the sub shop and play Type 1, Type 1.5, and Type 2 games. There really wasn't much in the way of banned and restricted lists when I first started playing the game. But yeah, I have been around for a long time. I have an in-depth understanding of the game. Certainly not pro quality, but I think that maybe at some point we might be able to get there.
Yeah, and that's debatable because I've seen brews that you've made, and you guys will just have to take me on my word on this. But I've seen brews that JB has put together over the course of say a month, and then he starts playing it online, and then a week later, you see it show up at a GP. You see it show up at a Pro Tour. It's happened several times, and that's actually one of the catalysts of why we started Lansay Go. Was we also just kind of wanted to have our stamp on our decks that we brew together, and be like, hey, look, we built that.
Yeah. As far as the brews go, it's important to remember that there's a style that I like to really try to represent. And some of that is to really disrupt the meta, to get outside of the common standard lists that you see. And more often than not, I feel like people are going to the 5.0 screens, right? The common deck lists. We can pull them up right now. We could talk about some of them. But I feel like people are going to those 5.0 screens, maybe adding just a little bit of variation, but more of what I feel like we try to do. If people look through certainly go to landsago.com, take a look at the deck lists that we release. We're posting 2 a week right now. Some of those are community submissions, but I think that they'll find that those submissions are outside of the current 5.0 lists, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And on top of that too, when we get those community submissions, we go in and we analyze those decks as they're submitted. And as I'm sure you guys will find, we also then kind of put our little twist on it too. So we'll end up showing almost 2 deck lists with some of these submissions, because we see the list and then we may see some areas, at least in our meta, that we could tweak and make it just a little bit tighter of a list, at least in our eyes. So it gives you guys a chance to also see 2 variations of the same list and kind of our thought processes on how we would go about upgrading these lists to make them just a little bit tighter.
I think a lot of what we do when we start looking at these lists, right? Like if we jump right into Bird is the Word, which is what I field tested last night, right? That I had released an article on that on Friday. I actually tested my blue version of that, in my opinion, and we'll jump right into the field reports here. Let's just.
Well, I still got to get to me.
Oh yeah. Oh, Debo. Yeah. Uh-huh. So let me tell you guys about Debo. He actually started the game. I don't know, probably 5-6 years ago. It may have been a little bit earlier than that, but he really didn't get into
it was around Origins.
Yeah,
right when Origins came about.
So 4 years. Mm-hmm. About 4 years or so.
And it was actually Jeremy that got me into the game. So thank you for that. Mm-hmm. And basically what happened to me is, I'm sure it happened to everybody else, is as soon as it clicked with me, basically I live and breathe and eat this game. Mm-hmm. I just eat it up. So
don't eat your cards.
Well, maybe the comments. So it's one of those things where it's called cardboard crack for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely addicted to the cardboard crack. So for me, at least for my play style, I'm one of those people that I either will build heavy hardcore aggro lists, or I'll build jank. There's hardly any in between for me when it comes to my lists.
Yeah. Some of the jank is real janky too.
Oh, real jank. Oh, yeah. It's so great.
Yeah. You do kind of embody that Johnny spirit sometimes. Mm-hmm. Not a Johnny. He doesn't really play a Johnny all that often, but he does embody that Johnny style in terms of seeking a core combo. Just look at some of the articles that he's posted, guys. You'll find out.
Whereas for you, Jeremy, I think one of the things that differentiates the two of us is, whereas I'm either that heavy aggro or that jank, you like to focus more on being a little bit more spiky, a little bit more competitive.
Oh yeah.
But then you also, your favorite archetype, that at least that I've come to understand, is ramp.
Oh yeah.
You love the ramp decks.
I do. I really do. I get into the ramp decks. There's really nothing better than a wide enough mana base that there is no restrictions to what you can cast in your hand. Sometimes multiples of very large spells that end up being a term that you like to use a lot, backbreaking for the opponent, right? Unfortunately, in the current standard meta, there's not really much outside of potentially Naya ramp, maybe that Simic ramp deck that's floating around. That Simic ramp deck's really unique in the way that there's overwhelming insight once they're able to resolve an omniscience, which from a tactical standpoint, if you're running any type of counter spell, you should be able to recognize that this is a Simic ramp deck that's trying to resolve omniscience and then hold back a counter to be able to kind of snuff that out a little bit.
Right.
Without omniscience, they are able to generate a tremendous amount of mana, but it never gets to the point where things are free to cast. Once things are free to cast, they're rolling out Nexus of Fate over and over and over again, shuffling back into their library. They have a potential there for infinite turns, leveraging Gaia's Blessing not only to shuffle 3 cards from their graveyard back into their library, giving them the overflowing insight back, and then draw a card off the Gaias, but the Nexus of Fate rolls out an additional turn, untaps, draw 7 cards, cast Gaia's Blessing, bring it back, take the next turn, untap, cast again, draw the cards. And the Nexus of Fate thing just happens and happens and happens. And all along the way, they're resolving Palaka Worms, gaining 7 life, drawing cards when it leaves the battlefield.
Or when it dies.
No, when it dies, right. A deck like that, Simic ramp, it's still not competitive enough to make it to a Pro Tour, right? In this current Pro Tour, yesterday I reviewed the lists, and we are getting away from introducing ourselves a little bit here, but I figure let's just dive right in.
Yeah, let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's just dive right in. So, but I was looking at the lists at the Pro Tour yesterday. 22% of the meta was Golgari. Most of it mid-range stuff. using Find Broker to really kind of recur some of what's going on. Of course, Choops Magoops is in there.
I love Choops.
Yeah, Chupacabra is a very good card, but the 4-drop Vraska is basically Putrefy on a stick. There's just a lot going on with mid-range. It's very hard to contend with. It's got some great surveil capabilities, and most of the decks that I saw from the leaked lists, or just watching the 5 rounds that they presented yesterday on Twitch late last night, ended up being, there was no Doom Whisperer in there, right? And that's the card that, as the set first came out, as people started really putting together Golgari, because Wizards is pushing us that way. Right? Yeah,
that is true. When Doom Whisperer came out, it was just the bee's knees. Everyone wanted it. It still is an extremely powerful card, right?
Yeah, it is.
They were calling it the next Griselbrand, which, I can understand why they would say that, but it's not quite to that same power level.
It is not a Griselbrand, but when it's targeted with removal, you have to know that if your opponent has the life total to leverage its pay to surveil to capability, that they're going to surveil until they find what they need in response. Most of the time, that's the next Doom Whisperer. So in that, it's able to replace itself, especially if you have some consistency in the stack of 60. You're able to find cards or answers. Maybe they just pluck another Vraska from the top. Maybe you're running something that's low to the ground with converted mana cost 3, and they grab a ritual, and really kind of set you back in a catastrophic way. Then we started seeing a lot of Boros. Right after that, just under 20% of the field was Boros as well. So I think that that's within the line of expectations for what we would see with this set. Certainly as we expand into Azorius, we get Simic into the mix with the next set. There's quite a bit that we're going to be doing there. 5-color becomes even stronger. I would argue that we might even see some Joda-style decks kind of come out of that a bit. The meta's good right now, solid right now, but not really exactly where I would like to see it in terms of diversity, right? I think Wizards of the Coast has a tendency to kind of push players into archetypes that they want them to have, and the restriction on the sets in the pool kind of funnel us all there.
I'd agree with that too. That's part of standard, right? Because they need to make it interesting enough for people to want to draft. That's their big thing, right? They want people to draft. They want people to put things together in a group of people where they're buying 3 packs apiece. That's how they make their money. So in doing so, they have to come up with these fun, wacky mechanics, and sometimes they translate well into standard. Currently, we haven't really seen a whole lot of archetypes built around these various mechanics. Probably the closest that you'd see is maybe the surveil mechanic.
Yeah.
Right now, Mentor hasn't really done anything. The Undergrowth, there's a little bit of that, but it's more of just light synergy versus a deck really being all in on the Undergrowth mechanic.
I think there's some Undergrowth mechanics that really shut down aggro strategies well. Necrotic Wound is a much better card than people give it credit for, right? At a 1-black, instant speed, -X/-X for each creature in your graveyard with that Undergrowth mechanic, that is an incredibly powerful card, especially in a deck like Golgari, which doesn't have a problem surveilling creatures away, with access to Find Broker and Iozoni, right? And Iozoni is, I think, really yet to be tapped. There's a lot of cards that have yet to be tapped right now in the standard meta. I think Dominaria has kind of fallen by the wayside with some of what's going on with Guilds of Ravnica. But you can expect a number of those cards to make a return as well. Teferi is dominating, right? He's a $60 card. People are playing him in Jeskai control. People are playing him in Esper control. What's missing from Esper control to really make it substantial is a Gideon ally of Zendikar-style Planeswalker that allows you to anchor yourself on 20 to 22 spells.
Well, the closest that we would have right now is Red-White Huatli.
Yeah, Red-White Huatli is seeing play.
Because she fits that same space that Gideon Ally of Zendikar did, except she can't attack.
Well, right. The Warrior Poet is not the ally of Zendikar. Right.
But she does pump out cheaper tokens.
Yeah.
But she comes in with 1 less loyalty.
Yeah.
She can gain you some life, and she can also take away some blockers or kill some things with some of those X1s.
Yeah, she's got a built-in Rolling Thunder as well. Dropping loyalty counters to deal X damage divided any way you choose among any number of targets is pretty substantial.
Right.
She's an incredibly worthwhile investment as far as your 5 slot in the deck.
But at that point, being in the 5 slot, she's competing with Teferi. So
Yeah.
but I mean, but I understand where you're coming from, where you need that 4-drop to have that token creation to be able to give you blockers or something.
You got to have something.
Yeah.
And we don't have Simic Synergy yet, which I think is where Bant will really go, right? Teferi will be built into Bant decks. There'll be some funny stuff kind of going on. But,
Right.
But yeah, that's let's dial back to who we are. We're two guys who love to play the game of Magic.
If you can't tell.
We're going to be working on this community side of things. I would expect that our media generation capabilities will get better and better. We're in the process of building a studio. We'll start doing some streaming on a regular basis, and I think that we're going to start being active once we can, more and more at GPs and events, and really try to get this brand out there as something that's recognized as something that benefits the community. What people can expect from us is that we're going to try to break the meta and always focus on the fun factor of the game, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I feel like some of the fun factors kind of being sucked out of it, right? In terms of the big marketing machine, in terms of the big events and pro decks and all of that, because people get confined into these lanes into the meta. Not that there's not surprises that take place in Standard. There certainly are. There are decks that show up in the other category that maybe make a deep run, right? But who am I kidding? The fun's not being sucked out of the game. It's right. It's just sometimes, people get confined. They get used to what they're playing, and it gets a little stale until we get that next set.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's one of the reasons why you and I like Standard so much, is because it's rotating. Mm-hmm. We always have fresh eyes on new cards.
Yeah.
And as you guys will come to know, we build a new deck every single week that we go to FNM.
Multiple.
We do not stay with one deck. We may revisit a deck if we come out, like if a new set comes out and then they have some card that like, ooh, that's perfect for this deck, and we may try it out again. But for the most part, we're building new decks every single week. And that keeps us on our toes, and I think that we really enjoy that. What I find an issue with that for people, excluding us and some other players, that can get really expensive for people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And really...
it's an investment.
This entire game, it's an expensive game for everybody, right? And Modern, some of the cheapest decks are... cheapest competitive decks are like $800 to $1,000.
Yeah, mostly the land base that does that.
Right, and then you have Legacy and Vintage, where it's tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. Mm-hmm. And then Standard, it's the cheapest deck is maybe $80 to $100.
Oh, you can go lower than that.
Well, true. The cheapest competitive decks are maybe $80 to $100.
Even still, then I'd challenge you could go lower than that. I mean, Mono Red Goblins is not an expensive deck.
Right, but how competitive is it within the current meta?
Very. 38 Goblins and 22 Mountains. Sounds pretty good to me.
That's
right?
true.
In the current meta. And it's one of those decks that's kind of like Elf Ball. It catches people off guard. I'm going to run a 38 creature Goblin list next F&M. And we'll get a field report in on that one. But I would posit that $50 deck is definitely something. The only card that drives that up is Siege Gang Commander. Mm-hmm. And if you've been playing the game for any amount of time, you probably got a couple Siege Gang Commanders lying around. You may not need to visit an LGS to pick those up.
I still think you should drop 4 more lands and run 18 lands.
Mm-hmm.
And then add in... four Steamkin in that list, and then there you go. There's your honorary goblins, and you just have
Debo. You've been on the Steamkin train for way too long, man.
It's so good. It's such a good card.
No, it is a very good card. It is. We could dive into that. We can get into those. We actually have other topics we need to get to in order to kind of compress this and be easy on our listeners.
So let's go ahead and get into our field report. So you said you played The Bird is the Word this past weekend.
Yeah, I put out the article yesterday, right, Friday. This was actually a community submission from the guy who never goes 4-0. And we've got some notoriety so far on the site, but somebody felt like dropping in a list. That initial list was a blue-white version of the deck. It was running Murmuring Mystic and, of course, Siren Storm Tamer to be able to turn on Wizard's Retort, also give us maybe some additional deflection for the Mystic once the combo was online, because everything really revolves around that 4-drop, right? We're putting Bird Illusions into play as we're casting instant and sorcery spells. Most of what he had submitted in the list included cards like Chemister's Insight, Dive Down, Opt, Radical Idea. So we're getting a lot of draw potential there. Opt certainly is one of those really quick cantrips in his list that gives us the ability to filter and draw. We also put a token into play, which may act as a chump blocker. Maybe we do it at their end step, and we've got an additional point of damage. But he had built in that blue Flyers package that we saw rolling around for a while there, right? A card I really like, or would have liked to see in his original list over Siren Stormtamer, that I also did not include in my list yesterday, was Warkite Marauder. That card is a house right now in Standard.
Right.
People do not realize how powerful it is to be able to turn a Lyra Dawnbringer
into a 0/1.
Into a 0/1 that does not fly when we're attacking, right? That is a tremendous benefit, and that card is incredibly capable, and if nothing else, it draws removal from our opponents that may be targeting our core combo. Yeah, cards like Take Heart, Quasi-Duplicate, a Johnny's Welcome, some enchantment back up there, so as we're generating burn tokens, we're stabilizing on our life total.
And that Quasi-Duplicate is to copy the Mystic, right?
Right, the Quasi-Duplicate copies the Mystic, it triggers and gives us a bird token. Once we're able to jumpstart it, we then have 2 triggers off of 2 different Mystics. As we continue to cast Quasi-Duplicate, it just, multiplicatively more copies of Mystic, more copies of birds for each one of the instances that we're casting. So, really solid deck. Very, very good. Again, hearkening back to that blue Flyers deck that we saw when Ixalan first came out, running favorable winds to give each of our flying creatures +1/+1. So that additional power and toughness puts a clock on the life total. It helps our birds become more resilient from things like Pirate Clasm, right? Which I did actually see some of yesterday. But either way, very, very solid deck. I'd like to be able to try it again at another FNM. I don't know if I'm going to get there in terms of this. You know how it is. We build decks so quickly. Hopefully the community submissions come in. We find other things that we like. We'll scrap those together, take them to an FNM, and put together a field report. Either way, really solid deck, focusing on Murmuring Mystic, Quasi-Duplicate to copy the Mystic, and then other instants to multiplicatively generate illusions, bird illusions, and flyers, and then buff them with favorable winds to crush our opponent.
From what I understand, because that was a blue-white list, right?
Yeah, it was blue-white.
So what did you see could have been taken out to make it a little bit more of a tight list?
Well, when I was testing the blue-white list, the mana base is a little weak. Right now, frankly, we're missing the Azorius piece, right? We need Hallowed Fountain to really be able to make this sing as well as it needs to with Glacial Fortress. The original list was running a number of plains, a number of islands, and just having that basic. Sometimes there were some inconsistencies there, and we really need dual land backup, right? I didn't want to be running Meandering River on a tapped basis. Sometimes I need a mana to come into play untapped. Otherwise, it was fine. It was fine. The deck performed well. I would give it a 7 out of 10 in terms of total efficiencies as far as a submission goes. There's probably better ways to play that deck specifically. I would recommend a main board inclusion of Teferi if you've got access to the card, just because his draw potential alone gives us more access to cantrips, sets up an additional threat, often draws a lot of resources from our opponents. And if we can chump block with birds to keep Teferi alive, we're getting there, right? We are getting there. But anyway, I decided to cut the white. I cut the white from the deck. I built a mono blue list. I added Tempest Djinn at a 4 of, because that becomes an incredibly lethal copy for Quasi-Duplicate.
Yeah.
Right? That is a wonderful target for that spell, for that sorcery. I also built in a little bit more instant speed draw and filter with Anticipate. If we've got access to Anticipate in the meta, we should be using Anticipate in a deck like this that creates bird illusion tokens, that gives us instant speed draw to find our next copy of Quasi-Duplicate or our next Mystic or whatever, right? Digging 3 deep over and over again is a great thing. I elected to go with 4 of the Chemister's Insight and 4 of the Radical Idea for the recursive jumpstarts in terms of instant speed, draw, and token generation. I also elected to bump the Siren Storm Tamer up to 4. That is a $5 uncommon right now for good reason. That card can.
I didn't realize it got up there that high.
Yeah, it's a $5 uncommon right now. Selling it at the LGS. You could probably find them online for a little bit cheaper than that, but it's still around $3.79 or so on Card Kingdom, which is one of my preferred go-to websites. I know you're a TCG player, man.
I am,
and that's where you take a lot of your online business. Sometimes Card Kingdom's costs are a little over TCG. Oh, most of the time, actually, their prices are higher than TCG. But I feel like I've got a good relationship with them, but most of that's probably in my head. I've never met them or been there.
But TCG or Card Kingdom, if you want to sponsor the show, you're more than welcome to drop us a line at info@lansego.com, and we'd be happy to make something happen.
Yeah, even still then, if you would like us to drop a sponsorship for you or represent your website on our website and try to give you some additional traffic, we'd be happy to do that.
All right.
So, go ahead.
Going away from the shameless plug.
Yeah.
Let's go back into your deck here.
All right. So, shameless plugs aside. But the deck performed very, very well yesterday. We only played 4 rounds at F&M. I went 3-1. I lost to a nemesis of mine here in the Kansas City area. His name's John Diesel. He's an old Magic player. He was originally on the Pro Tour back in the late 90s, right? Used to run and stomp around with John Finkel and some of the really old Hall of Famers out there. And Diesel's just a very, very good Magic player, okay? He's the kind of guy that baits you in, reels you in, and catches you, gets you to cast the one spell he wants you to cast. He's very good at picking up reads on you. But all 4 of my matches yesterday with this deck were against Golgari midrange. All 4 of my matches yesterday. So,
ouch.
Yeah, well, the first 3 games went really well, right? I lost game 1, the first 2 matches. But I had brought a sideboard that was an affectionate term of mine. Honey Bunches and Nope, right? I brought 12 counterspells and 3 copies of River's Rebuke. 13 counterspells and 2 copies of River's Rebuke. And I just boarded in heavy counterspells to follow up and let the Mystic do his job over time, placing counterspells as I needed to. Never dropped the Tempest Djinn, never dropped the Murmuring Mystic, but I would drop a lot of the draw package and go heavier into counters, right? There's nothing more pervasive as far as a threat goes than a Tempest Djinn, a flyer with 4 toughness that grows turn after turn, that gives us the ability to still utilize Anticipate and counter our opponent's spells. It is a substantial clock. When you can counter their removal, when you can counter a creature that may pose a problem for the Djinn, the deck just did very well, and I was pleased with it. And most importantly, Derek, it was fun to play.
That's good. And you played this deck online a couple of times, right?
I did, yeah.
So did you ever play against the blue-red matchup with Niv Mizzet?
Yeah, I played against the...
How do you combat Niv Mizzet with this mono blue version?
That's a really rough game for us, okay? Unless we've had an opportunity to really get multiplicative with the Murmuring Mystic beforehand, that is a major uphill battle for us, all right? The way you combat Niv Mizzet is Tempest Djinn. Once you have a resolved Djinn, right, that is quickly going to outpace the toughness of what they can block with Niv Mizzet. More importantly, the red-blue matchup's not so bad as the Grixis control matchup is, right? When they've got access to Cast Down and Vraska's Contempt, you really kind of find yourselves falling behind in a lot of those games just because early on they don't really care. And that Grixis matchup runs Essence Scatter's main board. They got 3 Essence Scatter's main board. You go to try to place a Djinn, it doesn't stick.
Right.
Right. You do stick a Djinn, they remove it on your instep. That is just one of those matchups where Grixis Niv Mizzet tends to be a much more competitive, almost into that Grand Prix style deck of what's available right now. And Mono Blue Murmuring Mystic is meant to be an F&M special,
right?
Where you go have some fun,
right?
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, field report all went really well with the deck. I would highly recommend again the main list by the guy who never goes 4-0. I would give that a 7 out of 10. After field testing my deck, I would give it a 7 out of 10 as well. I think that it's definitely got some weaknesses in terms of board sweepers. Specific, I didn't come up against any yesterday. but I play tested it enough online to know that one Cleansing Nova is all it takes if you don't have a counter spell up, and the game's over. Right? The game is over. So there are weaknesses, but every deck has that weakness. There's always something that can catch you.
Awesome. Well, for one of my lists, unfortunately, I was unable to attend yesterday's F&M, but I've had the opportunity to play the last couple. So one of my lists that I had brought recently was
Draw-Go.
That was the one I was going to bring yesterday, but I couldn't attend.
Okay, so you're going to get that next week.
Yep, next week.
All right.
This week, however, 2 weeks ago, I played the Mono White Life Gain list that we got put together. And this list is really interesting. It's a 61 card special.
Yeah.
And it has some good power in it. It really does. So the list runs 4 Leonin Vanguards, 4 Johnny's Pride Mates, 4 Resplendent Angels, and 2 Lyra Dawnbringers. The rest is just life gain synergies, like Johnny's Welcome, Fountain of Renewal, Dawn of Hope. Now, this deck with Fountain of Renewal and Dawn of Hope has probably one of the most powerful draw engines we have in Standard right now.
Yeah.
Being able to draw that additional card every turn or more is insane, especially in a mono white list.
Yeah, I mean, better than Mentor of the Meek for sure. It really is.
We're also running 3 Johnnies, and for our removal, we have 3 Seal Away, 2 Ixalan's Binding, and then 2 Field of Ruin and 21 Plains. So this deck, it really does not care about the burn matchup.
No, it does not.
It does not
I think
care.
that's what you were going for there.
Yep.
Yeah.
It does not really care about the blue-red isn't matchup.
No.
It doesn't. It has some great sideboard for against that Grixis control matchup that causes you to discard cards, which I was able to get off one of these times, which felt really great.
What was your record with this deck when you were at F&M? I know you had some pretty rough mashups there.
Yeah, I believe I ended up going 3-2.
3-2 is good
with it.
Yeah.
A big portion of the problems I was seeing was just flooding out like crazy.
Yeah.
So
sometimes your deck hates you, man. It just happens.
It's the magic gods.
It is. It happens.
So for the sideboard, we run a couple of Settle the Wreckage for some of those hexproof creatures that we can't really deal with. We have Sorcerer's Spyglass for the Teferis, the Sarkins, the Vraskas. Invoke the Divine to be able to hit those Ixalan bindings that hit our permanents that we want.
Yeah.
Bounty Agent.
You know, Ixalan's Binding. Could we just stop there for a second? Yeah. So Ixalan's Binding is one of those cards that I don't feel like we're really seeing right now.
Right.
But you can guarantee when we get access to Azorius, once we see those, you know,
we're going to see it all the time.
Well, just think about the last time we saw Azorius. We had Detention Sphere.
Right.
That card is nasty.
Right.
Mean stuff. Cards like Render Silent. Right? 2 blue and a white. 2 blue and a white. Counter target spell. That player can no longer cast spells for that turn. It's like, just think about it, right?
And we actually have two cards in Standard right now that silence people, sort of. We have the Sphinx's. It's the 1 and a white, the rare that nobody wants to play.
Sphinx's Decree.
It's Sphinx's Decree.
Yeah, that's it.
That stops people from casting instants and sorceries. And then we also have the Sphinx himself, the Lawbringer.
Okay, so Sphinx's Decree is for use on your turn in Standard.
Right.
It's for use on your turn. You want to shut down counterspell decks.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, you would cast that at the beginning of main phase 1. You would cast that in order to draw their counter, and hopefully for your next spell, draw their other counter to empty their hand, right? Anyway, getting back to Mono White Life Gain, I really like this deck. I tested it quite a bit, but
thanks. You know, just talking about Sphinx's Decree, that's actually a really good idea. Putting it in a sideboard for a Mono White list just for that reason.
Oh yeah, to empty their hand.
Yeah, it's kind of like the White Duress.
It is.
So, and then if not, then you get to be able to say if 6 mana, you can then
they let it resolve. We're off to the races, baby kicks.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Slam down your Johnny, get back your Pride Mate, something like that. That seems really good.
Until their turn, where they go to burn their removal on their turn, which is great. We're tying up their mana resources. It's what we want, right?
So we just broke the meta. All
Yeah.
right. So
A little.
against the Grixis matchup that causes us to discard cards, we also have a Johnny's Last Stand. This was beautiful against this matchup because I had an opponent cast their Nicol Bolas, forced me to discard. I luckily had 2 of these in hand, and I discarded one and got
in the art of the card.
It's in the art of the card. It was beautiful. Got a free 4/4 Vigilant Flying Angel.
I think I remember hearing the round of applause. I was on the other side of the room, but yeah.
We had a bystander going, I can't believe I just saw that.
No,
happen.
he said that just happened.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember that. He's like, that just happened. I saw it. Yeah.
So that's a great card for that matchup. We also have Shalai for going up against some of those heavy removal heavy lists. And then one of the cards that I have in here is Ashes of the Abhorrent. Now,
go ahead.
I don't know if I like this card.
Well, it wasn't, in the match that I saw you use it in, Derek, it didn't do what you thought
That's right.
it was going to do.
It was up against that Grixis control list, and he actually was running Demonic Betrayal in there. Oh, no, it was the Liches, the Rainbow Lich.
Yeah,
deck.
Rainbow Lich by Ali Antrazi.
And he was running 1 Mnemonic Betrayal in that list, which completely threw me off guard. And Ashes of the Abhorrent does absolutely nothing against Mnemonic Betrayal.
Yeah, it exiles the pile first.
Yeah.
Right. He's not actually casting it from the graveyard zone, so it ended up being a dead card for you. And as I remember, you had drawn more than one.
Yeah.
So
I had 2 in my opening hand, which...
You were looking for him, so you kept the hand.
Yep.
It's understandable, but it wasn't doing what you thought it'd do.
Yep. Now, really what this card is best for is that Izzet list that has more of those cast from your graveyard, like the jumpstart spells, that type of a thing. So it does have a place. If your meta is very heavy on that Izzet side, I think it's okay.
Oh, it shut down that. I think you're looking at risk factor, right? It would totally shut down the Mystic style stuff that we're doing. Any jumpstart style cards, it's going to really kind of crush that.
Yeah, even Chemister's Insight, which does see play in other control lists.
It does.
Kind of helps slow them down a little bit. On the removal heavy side, it also gives you a +1 life whenever a creature dies.
Yeah.
So that can give you, the opportunity to be able to draw additional cards, that type of a thing. So, it could have a place. Should it have a place? I think it really depends on the meta that you're in.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, all in all, I'd give mono white life gain. I don't know, what would you rate that out of 10 in terms of your experience with the deck?
I'd probably put it at a 6 or 7 out of 10. I think it's got more play than what I saw. Mainly because it's just the heart of the cards just wasn't there for me.
It's an incredibly resilient deck. I tested it for a while too before you took it to FNM. And if you like gaining bunches of life and you like not really caring about that as far as part, honestly, there are points where you won games while we were there at FNM and you were removing 2 or 3 20-siders from, in addition to the other one, and resetting yourself to 20, right? Like
That's
dropping from 78 life before your opponent finally scooped because, they're getting down to 14, 15 cards in their deck because these games are running really, 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 really long, and they know that some of the answers that you've got in place, especially in the way of Settle the Wreckage coming out of the sideboard. You got Sorcerer's Spyglass coming in to shut down planeswalkers of all types. But yeah, it was very impressive to me how well Johnny's Last Stand really ended up holding up to a lot of what was going on in the matchups that you had.
So I think that's a good stopping point for our field reports. If you guys have a deck list that you'd like us to write about and speak about, go ahead and drop us a line at landsago.com. We love to hear from you guys, and we love to see those lists. If you have like something in particular that you want us to really focus on, again, just drop us a line. We'd love to find out, and we'll see if we can make it happen.
What else are we talking about today, Debo?
So we're also going to be talking a little bit about Magic Weekend.
Get me up to speed on this. I'm a little out in the forest.
Sure. So Magic Weekend, WotC had put out an article saying that they're going to be introducing a new type of series of events. They're called innovation events, which is cool because, if you think about it, they have these innovation sets like Battle Bond or Conspiracy.
Let me look this up while you're talking about it here.
Sure. you have like Battle Bond and Conspiracy and other sets like that that give you a really unique play experience. Well, Magic Weekend is supposed to be kind of in the same vein as that, except it's innovation with events. So, for instance, when the next set releases, we're going to have a Vorthos event.
Okay.
That's going to be very heavy in the lore and the flavor of the sets, right? So that's kind of cool. If you're really into that, that sounds amazing. I'd probably be up for going to one of those.
Sure. I would imagine we will.
Mm-hmm. Now, we also see with those events, we also actually get some really great kind of casual prizes. So you have these really beautiful lands that have the set symbols on them, especially within the art of the actual symbol of the card. So like if it's an island, you have that blue watermark and everything.
Yeah, I saw those. It kind of follows suit with the guilds, right?
Exactly right.
Golgari,
exactly right.
Boros, Selesnya, Dimir. Is it? Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
And then they also have these nice posters. So if you like wall art, it could be something for your game room, something like that. And then they have an event that's going to be happening after this next set, probably when the third Ravnica set releases. That's supposed to have prizes that are very similar to Game Day, that have some full art promo rares and full art promo uncommons that we all like and things like that. And the reason why I was super stoked was like, man, we get that plus Game Day? Oh, this is sweet. And then you read down a little bit further in the article, and they're taking Game Day away.
Yeah, I'm looking at this article right now. It says, if those prizes sound familiar, you may know what's coming next. We've collapsed promo items for Ravnica Weekend, Ravnica Allegiance, and the Store Championship into one kit. And the Core Set 2019 Store Championship that happened last September will be the last event of its kind.
And that's, to me, that's heartbreaking because JB and I love to go to these Game Day events.
Yeah.
Right? We absolutely love doing it. And for these store championships. And so when these store championships are going to be going away, sure, we're getting another version of it. But I always like to see things, like more things added, not things being removed. Right? So I would have loved to have seen, sure, we're going to add a Vorthos event. Sounds great. We still have the store championship. Sounds great. And then we're going to have another event. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Right. But no, they're taking away that store championship.
Yeah.
That makes me kind of sad.
Yeah. Look, store championships being what they are, I mean, we see a lot of the same people here in Kansas City, right? And that's really, that's where we play. We play at all the local game shops here in Kansas City. We see a lot of the same faces. Even pros here in Kansas City show up at some of the bigger game shops. Spanky's Card Shop, 31st Century Games, Collector's Cash, all have very consistent tournaments and also their own crowds, their own cliques. But you could always count on the store championship being a very highly competitive environment, right? It was certainly much more interesting to me when the store championships, even a number of months ago, were actually at the beginning of a new set rolling out, right? We would get 3-4 weeks after a set dropping. So when you showed up at the store championship, you really didn't know what you were going to see. You'd see a lot of brews, a lot of creativity, a lot of new stuff. Then they moved it to the end or just before store championship would take place for a new set. I think that was 2019. Dominaria even did this, but they moved that store championship to the end of the life cycle of one of the sets before something new came out. And what ended up showing up at those two store championships was very highly detailed decks that had been around in the meta for 2.5 months now. And it's taking place after the Pro Tour, which is when the meta before a new set drops tends to get very tight, kind of stale. People are playing decks that win and that outpace pretty much all the creativity that could take place regarding a new set. That was a mistake on their part, in my opinion, moving the store championship to the end or just before a new set came out, because now we've experienced the Pro Tour for that set. Now people are just going to play those decks. They're going to buy up those cards. You'll see some wild fluctuations in price based upon the winning decks. Certain cards and deck lists just tend to outpace everything else. Removing the store championship in its entirety yeah, at first, the first strike to the drum for me is a very negative one, right? It's that's not something that I want to hear, that they're removing store championships. But maybe, and I tend to be certainly less optimistic than you in regarding a number of things, but maybe these weekends, right, these Magic weekend things will generate enough interest and enough traction that the player base can still show up and keep it kind of competitive. I'm certainly going to give the first couple a crack here. We'll see how it goes. But I think that by and large, where I'd like to leave this, in my opinion at least, is that the store championship is going to be missed, right? Those trophies was something I always enjoyed chasing, whether it be the playmats or the top 8 deck boxes, which I thought were great ideas. As you know, I've got a number of those playmats kind of stacked up in my Magic room.
And they did say that they will have more playmats. That is a prize you can win in the competitive, not store championship, store championship.
Yeah, foil
right?
full art rares, a playmat.
Right.
You know.
So the prizes are all the same, but it's not the store championship anymore. Like I would have been much more happy had they left the store championship in and then had this competitive Magic Weekend innovation event that also gives you a playmat or something like that.
Well, I mean, we get the playmats, but does it say champion on it? Right?
That's a good question. We don't know. Time
does
will tell.
it say champion? Is it a trophy? Does
Right.
it give you the initiative to buy a case to protect your trophy before you leave? I don't know. You know, it's the whole thing about Magic here. It's pretty nerdy, right?
It's true.
The whole thing's pretty nerdy. We're rolling up this trophy and tucking it into a plastic case just so we can pull it out and, you know, flaunt some of our accomplishments. But that's exactly what it is. When you go and you win a store championship, the people who are there at that store championship with you, who lose to you as you progress to the top of that pyramid, as you take that number one prize, which is that playmat, and you walk out of that LGS, they remember that you won that store championship last time. And they don't want to sit down across from the table in a competitive sense from you next time, right? You develop a reputation for being a store champion. And when you sit down across someone who's never played you before, and that's the mat that you unroll, they realize that you've had to fight your way there in some capacity before. So
yeah,
that's a good thing. I guess to tie it up, we're going to have to wait and see. I'm sure that we'll get to that on a podcast in the future here.
Yep. All right, and our last topic for the day, we're going to be talking about Ultimate Masters. So,
go ahead.
All right,
let's get into it.
So, without looking at the price,
No, go ahead.
This is a great reprint set.
Go ahead.
It really is. It's an amazing reprint set for someone like me who hasn't been in the game for very long.
No, it is.
It's a great set to pick up to be able to hopefully get some of the cards that you want, some foil premium versions of them, and then it'll drive down the prices for you to then be able to pick up your singles.
It's a pretty expensive gamble.
Yeah, it is. Now, that's my biggest issue with this set is WotC has literally come out and made the statement saying these master sets are not for the average player.
What the hell does that mean?
So they've come out and it's for the collector.
Okay.
It's for the person who wants the nice flashy foil version of it.
Right.
And this is the epitome of their take on this because it is so far out of the reach for the average Magic player. The average demographic is predominantly male, between the ages of 18 to 30.
Some of the best players I've ever played are women, by the way.
Right.
The ones who take the game seriously.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that
I know
women can't be great at Magic. Of course they can.
Please get off that topic. Let's just move along.
I'm trying.
Back to Ultimate Masters.
All right. But having that demographic, the average income of those people,
right,
is not high enough to sustain someone going out and buying 1, 2, or 3 of these boxes, especially at the MSRP of $335, which if the rest of the rares and stuff are as good of quality as what they've already released with like Emrakul, Snapcaster, Liliana, Ulamog, Dark Depths, Cavern of Souls, just to rattle off a few. Well, if the rest of the rares are any indication that they're going to be of that high of a quality, then who's to say that the LGS or online vendors then aren't going to start selling them for $350 or $400? Now, obviously, if they're going to have a bunch of stock, it's going to drive the price back down because people then can't afford that.
Well, I think some of the reflection that I was seeing from the player base yesterday when I was just out there, right? Of course, a new Masters set comes out. They also said that Masters would be the last of its kind.
Yeah, the Ultimate Master, at least for this point in time.
They're putting it on hiatus. They're putting it on ice, thing in the ice for a while. So the Ultimate Masters set represents to me, and I'm going to come right out and say this, all right? I'm going to come right out and say that I feel like it is a shameless money grab.
Yep.
It is a shameless money grab. It is outpriced. We have to be very realistic. I'm going to give a nod to Tolarian Academy here and the professor. I watched an 18-minute video that he made when this was first announced. He does a very good job of gathering some of his information. There's some of the things that some of his ideologies and stuff I really don't align with, but all in all, he is extremely in tune with what's going on in Magic.
And he also, just to piggyback off that, he also seems to always line up his content with what is best for the average player.
What is best for the player.
Yeah.
We are all average players.
Right.
We are all the average player. What is important to me in the game of Magic probably aligns with what's important to you in the game of Magic in some capacity. That may not be the case. I don't really get into hardcore collectors. I have a good collection of Magic cards. Okay. But I don't get in line with the investment guys. I don't really, to me, some of that is just kind of, I get it. It's cool. I don't really get into the whole showboating thing with all of that. You ever want to bust out your collection and have a conversation with me about who's got what, we can have that conversation. That's fine. You know what I mean? I've been playing a long time. I'm very fortunate that I started the game when it first came out. I was a very nerdy kid, and I collected and kept all my cards, some of them in good condition, some not, right? But getting back to Ultimate Masters, full art foil versions of cards that are very highly desirable in terms of modern play may not be, and this is where I'm in line with the professor on this, may not justify an MSRP of $335 as a suggested price.
And on top of that, it's not even full art. It's super art. It's got the art box is just expanded to the edges of the card, and the rest of the card still has a normal border.
They're cool. Some of it is new art. I'm not dogging on the game. I love it, man. It's fine.
I'm agreeing with you. Like it's not even full art.
It's
right,
but it boils down to and the box topper thing. That's cool. The box topper thing didn't go too well. People have already proven that you can see on the inside of those box topper packs.
Yeah,
with the right kind of flashlight.
So, public service announcement: do not buy the box toppers. If you're going to buy anything from the set, do not buy them standalone.
Yeah.
If you're gonna buy a box, all power to you. If you're gonna buy a box, make sure that it's a sealed box, so that way you don't get a repacked box topper with one of the like Tassigers. That's gonna cost what, $5 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, or $1 rare land or something. Either way, look, Ultimate Masters could be very, very good. There could be an opportunity for us to be able to see a decrease in that MSRP, certainly as players are not able to afford cracking some of those boxes, but I'm sure it'll just go swimmingly for Wizards of the Coast and they'll fly off the shelves and you won't be able to buy them up. But just to put this in perspective, you could buy a brand new Xbox One. For $300, you could buy backstage passes to your favorite artist's concert and spend a couple hours with them and really have a life experience for yourself. At $335, for some people, they may be going short on gas or food for the month to be able to buy into something like that.
Yeah.
Where I think $10 for a Masters pack on a gamble is something that's totally acceptable as we start to approach $15 on a pack of cards that were in previous Master sets. I mean, I don't know, man.
Now, to me, there's a caveat, and that is do not buy this set at $335. If you were to walk into your LGS and they offer it for $335, just walk out, don't buy it. Because it is, while there are powerful cards in here, it's not worth you spending that much money on
You can buy all 4 copies of your Tarmogoyf for $335.
Yep.
And if that's what you're going to try to look for, the art doesn't matter. It doesn't care. It's the fact that it's a 6-7 when you got the proper cards in the graveyard.
Yep.
Okay. It just boils down to good math. If we're talking about investments, I don't think it's a good investment. I've opened enough boxes of cards, especially some of these rare run sets, extremely limited run sets, to know that sometimes you get burned.
Yeah, I've gotten burned several times.
And I've seen you win, too. I saw you open a foil Jace the Mind Sculptor as well as another Jace the Mind Sculptor in the same box, right? We know that sometimes it can really be good.
Yep.
Look, I'm all about Wizards making cards accessible in additional runs, right? I'm also a very strong proponent of the reserve list. I believe that that is something that keeps the concrete floor. And we'll get onto this in another podcast, I'm sure.
Of course.
Good heated debate on that one, probably. But he's smiling at me right now from across the desk. But you know, there is conversation to be had there about that, making cards that people want to play in certain decks accessible and keeping the price on those cards down or including them in new standard sets. I'm all about it. Ultimate Masters for me, if I had a whammy button right now, which we probably will in future podcasts, go ahead and put a whammy sound in for me right here, Debo. Thank you. But if I had a whammy button, I would say whammy on this set. It is not an investment that I'll be making.
Now, if you can get this close to what the original MSRP is for a master set,
$240.
then I think it's worth to pick up a box if you can afford it, right? But do not buy this at $335 or more.
If they'd have told me 2 months ahead of the set coming out that the set was coming out, and I had an opportunity to take some of my fun money and kind of stock it away for $240 just to kind of, put some money away, put it aside, maybe even cash in a couple cards that are in the collection that, maybe gathering a little bit of dust or something right now, but are in a perfect fit sleeve and are also, stuck in a brick, you know what I mean? But maybe cash in a card or make a cash transaction with a local game shop, and they gave me enough time to do that, that'd be fine. But they kind of sprung it on us 4 weeks ahead of time, surprised us with some leaks. I don't believe that any of it was unintentional in terms of the Hasbro fiasco.
Oh, well, of course not. The Hasbro fiasco, if people don't know, people tried to buy the Mythic edition of Guild of Ravnica.
That's right.
And the Hasbro toy shop website basically imploded on itself as people tried to buy these things.
Yes, it did.
So they ended up sending out a lot of these box toppers to people as hey, we're sorry that happened. Hopefully you were able to pick up your Mythic edition. Here's this card as like a preview of what we're going to be announcing on Monday. Mm-hmm. And so then they finally announced it, and they told us the MSRP, everything like that. So it is only, they only gave us about a month before it was going to be released to be aware of this. One thing, kudos for WotC for actually not allowing this to get leaked, right?
Yeah.
Like for how bad that it's been for them on cards getting leaked. I'm surprised that they were able to keep a lid on this one.
Yeah. There's a first time for everything.
I know. But I think another reason why they're trying to target this time frame, it's right at the time when people are going to start buying gifts for their family, for themselves, for Christmas.
Yeah.
So they're definitely trying to hit that market. But again, the price is so dang expensive.
Yeah.
How do you expect grandma or mom or dad to go, like, hey, I want to pick up a nice MTG product for my son or daughter that loves this game. $350,
and then the helpful person at the toy store is like, let me direct you to an Xbox One Platinum with a copy of Red Dead Redemption 2.
So I definitely am on board that this was a huge miss in terms of the MSRP. The box topper would have been great had it not actually changed the MSRP of the box.
Yep.
They've basically set to where the box topper costs $50. A little bit more than that, but had the box topper just been a little bit of icing on the cake and they kept the MSRP around $235, $240, this set would be perfect.
Yep.
But they didn't.
Well, we're not going to end this on a negative note. We will say that we're going to continue to cover Magic news, certainly as we continue to do these broadcasts, try to keep them one a week or so, sometimes get into more. We're going to be developing more content at Lansego. We're going to be putting together videos. We're probably going to put together a streaming schedule for you guys. But we've got to start somewhere. And since that is current news with Ultimate Masters, we wanted to make sure that we address that here. Expect continued field reports from the Lansego team, both Derek and myself. Relevant Magic news And then maybe some of our schedule is put together some Land Say Go events and opportunities for you guys to get involved with Land Say Go as we maybe even visit your neck of the woods. So yeah, Ultimate Masters, my recommendation there, just to kind of shore that up from my opinion, is find a tournament where you can win a box, take a deck with you, and go get it. That's what I would do. And that's what I'm actually looking to do right now, is find some things here in the Kansas City area, maybe even the surrounding areas, St. Louis, Columbia, Missouri, Chicago, whatever, where I can attend an event and have an opportunity to compete for one of those boxes, because then it's your prowess, it's your talent, and it's your love of the game that gets you those special trophies. And who knows, one of those packs may contain one of those super art cards. Well, at least one of them will, and hopefully it's a valuable one for you. Yeah, thanks for joining us for what would be our first podcast ever at landsaygo.com. Until next time, this is Jeremy
and Devo
signing off.